Hi class, in today's video I am going to be talking to you about one of my favorite packages, gganimate. So in this demo we're going to go through creating the animations from the tutorial that you probably just went through, plus a bonus animation at the end, so stick around. Okay, just to remind you, when we create an animated plot with gganimate, we'll follow these steps. Create our base ggplot, add appropriate geom layers, add any other stylistic additions, themes, titles, etc. We will add a gganimate transition layer, and then we'll add some other gganimate options. And in some of these options, we might make some changes in the ggplot code. Okay. Let's start with transition states. So first I'm going to prep some data. This is some garden harvest data. So let's just walk through this code together. We take the garden harvest data, filter down to the tomatoes, group by variety and date. And then I'm going to summarize to get the daily harvest in pounds. And then I'm going to add a variable called day of week, which will be the day of the week, and it'll actually give the name, not a number. I ungroup the data, and then for variety, I'm going to replace that, and the replacement is going to be a reordered variety, and it is ordered by total harvest. So let's run that code. And here we can see all the different tomato varieties that you're probably all quite familiar with now. Okay, so let's start with its static plot. So in this plot, we take the data we just created. We put daily harvest on the x-axis, day of week on the y-axis, and we're going to create a jittered plot, which is like a scatter plot, but the points are just have a little bit of noise added to them so that they don't lay on top of each other. And we are going to facet this for now to be able to look at all the different varieties. And then I changed my labels a little bit. So when this file is knitted, this actually looks quite a bit better. But for now, we can sort of see this shows, you know, the distribution of the different varieties by day of the week. So part of me was wondering, like, maybe on the weekends, I end up harvesting more because that's when I have more time. Okay, so this is our static plot. Now instead what I want to do is create this plot with animation. So instead of showing each variety by itself, I am going to animate through each variety. So I got rid of the faceting piece, and here the rest of the static plot is the same. Here I'm going to use transition states. Oops. And the states I'm going to transition through are going to be, if I can type, variety. Okay, so if I run this code, you should all have something else to do while I'm running through these parts, because this part takes a while. So we're just going to sit and wait for the code to run. All right, and then it gets to this part where I can see that something is happening. It's creating each of these frames, and I get excited because I know the animation is almost complete. Okay. And like I said in the tutorial, these animations show up over in this lower right-hand corner rather than right underneath the code chunks like we're used to. So you can either sort of make this bigger to get a nice view, or what I often do is pop this out and it'll open in a web page, which you can't see because it's not on the screen, but I promise you I am viewing it over in a web page. I mean, I can go ahead and make this really big if I want to. So now, one of the things we realized in the tutorial piece was that the way this currently is, it looks like the points are sort of morphing into the other varieties. So we want to fix that. We've also lost our variety labels. We want to fix that. And then, oops. And then I think I've added a few extra things. So let me, come on. Okay, there we go. And I'm going to close this because it starts to kind of drive my eyeballs a little bit bonkers. Okay, so because we don't want to have to keep running this every single time, what we should do is add an echo, oops, I'm sorry, not that, add an eval equals false, so that we don't evaluate this every time we knit our file. Oh, and I made a mistake. That should be eval equals false. And then we should save our animation, which I'm not going to do right now because I've already saved this one, but you should save this animation. Usually I put this anim save code chunk inside of this code chunk. And then we can reload the animation. So if I run this, this is going to be that same plot because I have it set up that way. Okay, so this is how we'll read our plots back into our studio when we knit our files. All right, and here we're going to make some changes. So one of the things we noticed was that the points look like they're morphing into other varieties. So the way we're going to fix that is by adding this group aesthetic. And this assures that the varieties are grouped together so they won't morph into those other varieties. The other thing we want to do is we want to give this a label. And I'll be honest, I never remember what these automatic variables are that are created. So I'm going to go to the help. And I'm going to scroll down, and right here are the variables that get created with this transition function. So the one I'm going to use is closest state. And when I use these variables, I have to enclose them in those curly brackets. And that will access those variables in this subtitle. I changed the transition length and state length. So I believe I made the transition length twice as long as the state length. I shrank the points when they leave. I made the points light blue when they entered and also light blue when they exited. And then the other thing I did is I saved this, and I don't actually remember what I saved it as, but no, apparently I saved it as tomato gganimate. Sweet. We'll use that again. So I saved this file so that I could use this animate function and sort of have more detail or more control over how the animation gets created. So I believe I made the duration 20 seconds. Okay, let's go ahead and try that. So that's going to run a while. While that's running, I am going to get ready to save the file. And it'll automatically save the most recent animation. So be very careful when you're using this, because if you've created some other animation in the meantime, it will no longer be the one you think it is. Okay, so because I've already saved these, I'm just gonna sort of make up a name here. But that's where we would save it. And then if I was going to read it back in, This is where we use the include graphics, and we could do test.gif. So here's that new plot that was created. So here we see they're not morphing into the other variety types. They're sort of just coming in and going out. And I guess I could save it and read it back in just so you can see that that works. Okay. All right, let's move on to transition time. So we're going to prep a new data set. So with this data set, we have the garden harvest data. We're filtering down to this subset of vegetables. We're grouping by vegetable and date and computing this daily harvest in pounds. And then I create a static plot. So here I have put date on the x-axis, y on the, or daily harvest on the y-axis. And I'm coloring and shaping by vegetable. And I do that because I've used a variety of green colors. And then I am plotting points. So there's my static plot showing the daily harvest for these various vegetables. And now let's animate this. So we're going to animate over time. So over the date. Here's my static plot. And I'm going to right away make some of these changes that we like to make. So here I'm going to use transition time. And I am going to transition over date. I'm adding this shadow wake, which leaves like sort of like a little trail behind me of my previous values. And it leaves about 1/3 of them there. And then as the points go away, they're going to fade out. And then the last thing I want to do is add the actual date in here. And once again, I forget what the name is. So let's go to the help. The variable that's created here is called frame time. So that's what I'm going to use here. And let's go ahead and run that code. And as usual, this will take just a moment. So we would save it using the, the anim save function. Give our GIF a name. Let's see, daily harvest.gif. And then I would read it back in using the include, did I spell that right? Include graphics. I forget the name of it now. Yep, include graphics and daily harvest.gif. So let's take a look at this, and I'm actually gonna minimize some windows here. Let me bring this over here so you can see what it looks like when I open it on the internet or on a web browser. So you can see those little some points trailing behind there. That is from the shadow wake. Okay. My computer is really humming right now, so I am clearly making it work hard. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and skip this step for now, but that's how you would save those. And let's move on to the last transition we're going to talk about, which is transition reveal. So this will show you a little bit, kind of build up the graph over time, over whatever state you tell it to. So first I prep the data. Very similar to the last prep I did, except for here I'm adding the cumulative sum. Same subset of vegetables. And I create the static plot. So this time I'm going to create lines. So there we have the different lines. And let's animate the plot. So I've added a couple things in here. One is that I added a label. So I'm gonna label this by vegetable. I think this is a really cool thing to do. And oops, I forgot to X that out. The transition we're using is transition reveal, and we're gonna do that by date as well. And once again, I have forgotten the name of the variable created. So let's check that out in help. It is called frame along. So we'll put that in here. And run this, and while it's doing it, I will do the anim save, and you would put a name in here. So this is like cumulative veggie plot. And then I will read it back in using, include graphics. Cum-veg.gif. Okay, let's take a look at our plot here. So here we can see, oops, scroll down a little bit. There it goes. So we can kind of see those labels growing with it. So it's a nice way to have the, you don't need a legend this way. It's kind of a nice way to do that. Okay, and on to the last animation, which I thought was only going to take me a little bit of time to create. But it took a lot longer than expected because I had to do some things I hadn't fully thought about. So I first start by getting the daily harvest in pounds for each vegetable for each date I have. And then I use this complete function. I see another mistake. I haven't fully gotten this correct yet, but we can work on that. So this will put in a value for every date vegetable combination that's in the data set. And then I order it by vegetable and date. Actually, that was probably an interim step where I was just looking at what was being done. So maybe we could run this code real quick here. So what you'll see is that there's a ton of missing values, but what I wanted is I wanted to make sure I had a cumulative harvest date that lasted until after the last harvest date for that vegetable. I'll show you what I mean in a sec. Actually, if we look over at this graph over here, you see how the P's one ends? For the new graph I'm gonna make, I wanted that P's one to go all the way until, you know, time ends. Okay, and actually, maybe I should tell you that what I'm trying to make here is something called, oops. I think people call them like bar chart races or racing bar charts. So here's an example of one that I just found when I was searching the internet. Although when I make it, I'm not going to have the axis moving like this. My axis is going to stay fixed and only the bars will move. So that, oops, that is my goal. So let's get that back out of the way. Get this back over here. Okay, so I replaced, once I did this, I replaced all the missing values with zeros because that meant on those days I didn't harvest that vegetable. The thing I'm just noticing right now is that I do still have days where dates that aren't represented. These are only dates where I actually harvested things, and maybe that's okay. From here, I compute the cumulative harvest in pounds, and I get rid of any dates where the cumulative harvest was or I keep all the dates where the cumulative harvest was greater than 0, because I didn't want any dates before there was any harvest of that vegetable. So now we'll run that whole thing. When I get to creating the static plot, I realized I still had a little bit more work to do, so I just threw it in here. So for each date, I filtered, I only kept dates that had at least 10 vegetables harvested. So essentially I'm starting at a date where I have at least 10 vegetables. And then for each date, I only kept the top 10 cumulative weights. This was, the arrange is just a step where I was checking my work. And then for each date, I ranked those harvests because they were, oh no, this wasn't an interim step, I'm sorry. So once I've arranged them by date and cumulative harvest, I ranked them from 1 to 10, where 10 is the most harvested and 1 is the least. And then for creating the static plot, I just filtered down to a couple dates so that I didn't have to look at all the data at once. We'll get rid of that when we add the animation. And then I plotted cumulative harvest on the x-axis. I plotted this rank on the y-axis, and I'm going to fill it by vegetable. By vegetable. I create a GM call, and then this GM text piece is actually adding the label. And I'm wrapping this by date. Actually, I don't need that scales free Y. That's a remnant of something else I was doing. I changed my x-axis to accommodate the label I'm adding in there. And then the rest of this is sort of just, you know, changing some themes and whatnot. So when I do all of this, this does not look very pretty right now, but let's open it in a bigger window. It'll look a little bit prettier. So essentially for each of these dates, I get the top 10 vegetables. What I want to do is I want to create that animated bar graph, that racing, oops. Let's not do that. That racing bar graph. So now let's, oops, that was the wrong one. Okay, so now let the races begin. Let's add the animation. So most of this stayed the same. I got rid of the faceting and instead added this transition time. I also changed the number of frames and the duration, which is something else you can do in that animate function. I saved that. I'm not going to run this again because it took a while. And then I can load it back in, which I will do for you. So you can watch my veggies race away. This is 30 seconds of vegetable racing, which I'm sure you're all excited to see. There's the day I harvested the pumpkins and squash. All right, and then it starts over again. So that is one of the ways you can make a racing bar chart. So I'm going to end on that note. I hope you enjoyed learning about animation. I think you will have fun working on it for your weekly exercises. All right, bye-bye. There we go.